Girls, you won't believe what I discovered about my neighbor. I'm Ruth. I'm 62 years old, and for the past 4 weeks, I've been watching through the crack in my lace curtains, something that has left me completely sleepless, hungry, and at a loss for peace. My neighbor Miguel, a distinguished man of about 66, married for over 30 years to Carmen, a lovely woman who has always been a constant presence in the neighborhood, has started receiving very, very strange visitors. And when I say strange, girls, it's because every single night, always at the same precise time like a Swiss clock, a young, beautiful, elegant, and very well-dressed woman would appear at his door. Guys, I swear to all the saints that my heart was racing like a schoolboy just witnessing that whole situation. You know how it is, right, girls? We've lived in the same neighborhood for years. We know every neighbor, everyone's schedule, who works where, what time each family leaves and arrives, when they have visitors, when they have barbecues on the weekend. It's that neighborhood life where everyone knows each other and helps each other out when needed. My house is right next to Miguel and Carmen's, separated only by a low wooden fence her husband built himself about 5 years ago. From my living room window, I have a perfect view of their driveway, the porch where they always have breakfast on Sundays, and I can even see part of the backyard from my upstairs bedroom window. Look, I need to make it very clear to you. I'm not one of those people who snoops into other people's lives out of spite or bad gossip. Absolutely not. I've always been a respectful woman who minds her own business and only gets involved in her neighbor's affairs when it's helpful. But this particular situation caught my attention so much, it was so outside the norm of our quiet neighborhood, that I simply couldn't ignore it or pretend I wasn't seeing it. It was something that stirred me, awakening a curiosity I'd never felt before in my entire life. Carmen, Miguel's wife, often traveled to visit her sister who lives in the countryside, in a small town where her family owns a dairy farm. She usually makes these trips 2 or 3 times a year, always carrying those large plaid suitcases filled with gifts for her nephews and local produce that's hard to find there. She always stays there for about 2 weeks, helping her sister with the farm chores, catching up on her family, and taking a break from the busy city life. And always, whenever she left the house with those suitcases, I noticed these mysterious visits starting to happen at Miguel's house. Coincidence? With my entire life experience, with 62 years of intense observation and feminine intuition, I don't believe in coincidence. You know, girls? My intuition, as a mature woman who has been through a lot in life and knows how to recognize when something is out of place, was screaming louder than a salesman's doorbell that something very strange, very secret, and very important was happening right next door. The first time I saw this mysterious woman was on a rainy Friday in late March, one of those autumn nights when the temperature starts to cool, and we can already feel that pleasant chill in the air. I remember every detail of that night clearly, because it was when it all began, when my quiet, retired life was turned upside down by so much curiosity and worry. I had just finished watching that afternoon show I love, where they talk about homemade recipes and household tips. I had my favorite blue porcelain mug full of steaming hot chamomile tea on the coffee table next to my armchair. I had put on the pink flannel pajamas with little flowers my daughter gave me last Christmas because the chill was starting to set in. I had turned on the television to watch my 8 o'clock soap opera, which at that time was in a very interesting episode where the young lady was about to discover that her father wasn't who she thought. It was exactly at 8:25 in the evening. I remember the time because I glanced at the clock on the living room wall when I heard the noise. That I heard a car pulling up on the street, right in front of Miguel's gate. It wasn't just any old-fashioned car noise we're used to hearing in the neighborhood. It was the characteristic sound of an expensive vehicle, one of those imported cars that makes a distinctive roar when starting and stopping the engine. That softer, more refined sound we recognize from afar. The engine was quiet, well-maintained, and when it shut off, it made that typical sound of a well-maintained car with a well-maintained engine and regular maintenance. Curious as I've always been since I was little, my mother, God rest her soul, always said I'd die of curiosity one day, which was one of my most defining characteristics since childhood. I got up from my favorite beige floral armchair, the one I bought at the downtown department store sale about 3 years ago, and which is the most comfortable piece of furniture in my living room, and went to the living room window that faces the street. I slowly, very carefully, opened the white lace curtains I inherited from my mother-in-law when she passed away, taking care not to make any noise or turn on any lights that might give away my observation. I discreetly peeked through the cracks, trying to see what was happening outside on that rainy night. Good heavens. When I first saw that scene, I nearly dropped my teacup on the marble floor I'd just polished that afternoon. It was such a visual shock that my heart instantly raced. She was an absolutely beautiful woman, maybe 25, 30, at most. That age when a woman is at the peak of her beauty and femininity. She had long, shiny hair that blew in the wind on that rainy night, like a shampoo commercial. She was wearing an elegant light beige wool coat, one of those expensive ones you see in the windows of fancy stores in shopping malls that cost more than a minimum wage. She was carrying a large, genuine brown leather bag that looked heavy from the careful way she held it with both hands. She walked with all the confidence and elegance in the world to the blue door of Miguel's house, as if she knew the way perfectly and had made that journey many times before. What struck me most, ladies, and what truly intrigued me from the very first moment, was the absolute naturalness, the complete calm with which she walked up to the door and rang the bell. It wasn't a timid or hesitant knock, like someone visiting a place for the first time and unsure if they're at the right address. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was a decisive, confident knock, like someone who already knows the house very well, someone who feels completely at ease in that environment, someone who knows exactly what they're doing there and has no doubt about their presence there. And her posture, oh my God, was that of someone who felt at home, accustomed to this situation. She stood there at the door, waiting for it to open, stroking her rain-soaked hair to remove the droplets, looking around with the naturalness of someone in her own backyard, adjusting her bag on her shoulder without any rush, as if she had all the time in the world and knew she would be warmly welcomed. And Miguel? Oh my God, this part shocked me even more. Miguel opened that blue wooden door so quickly it felt like he'd been right there, glued to the door, waiting for her since early afternoon. The speed with which he answered the doorbell was impressive, as if he'd been warned she was coming, as if he'd been anxiously awaiting this moment for hours. And even more impressive was how he was dressed and groomed to welcome her. Miguel, a simple gentleman in everyday life, wearing flip-flops, an old t-shirt and faded shorts, always with that relaxed look of a retiree with no important commitments, was completely different that night. He wore a new, neatly pressed light blue dress shirt, without a single crease or wrinkle, dark dress pants that fit snugly, black dress shoes gleaming like mirrors, and he'd even put on that imported cologne that I could smell even from my house when the night wind blew in the right direction. To complete the transformation, he had styled his hair with gel, something I'd never seen him do in all the years we've been neighbors. He had shaved meticulously, leaving his face smooth and smelling nice, and even his nails looked specially cut and cleaned. It was a complete production, the grooming of a man preparing for something very important, something very special, something that requires special attention to his appearance. They greeted each other there at the door for several minutes, and even from my distance I could tell their conversation was lively, intimate, and familiar, full of smiles and warm gestures. She gestured a lot as she spoke, moving her hands expressively, and he nodded enthusiastically in agreement with everything she said, as if it were a conversation between people who have known each other for a long time and have a close, and affectionate relationship. Their body language was unmistakably that of people who are intimate, who share secrets, who feel comfortable in each other's presence. There was no formality or distance, no awkwardness or shyness. On the contrary, it was a natural, spontaneous, affectionate interaction that clearly demonstrated that this was far from the first time they had met in this way. The familiarity was so great that it was disconcerting to outsiders like me. Please, ladies, enjoy this video, because this story will only get more intriguing and full of twists and turns you can't even imagine. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any details of this investigation I've been conducting for weeks, and leave your thoughts in the comments. So far, what theories you have about this mysterious woman and this whole situation. And for the love of all the saints, don't leave the video because the ending of this story is simply surprising. You won't believe what I discovered after so much time observing and investigating. After 5 or 6 minutes of lively conversation at the door, he made an elegant, inviting gesture with his right hand. She smiled that charming smile only a beautiful, confident woman can muster, and entered the house as naturally as someone entering their own home without any hesitation or ceremony. Miguel stood there for a few seconds, and that's when I noticed some very strange and suspicious behavior on his part. He carefully glanced up and down the street, checking for neighbors at their windows, for anyone passing by on the sidewalk, for cars parked nearby, people watching. It was clearly the behavior of someone doing something that needs to be kept secret, someone who doesn't want to be seen or discovered. When his eyes flicked toward my window, I quickly hid behind the curtain, my heart pounding like a young girl in love doing something forbidden. He stood there for another minute, looking carefully around, like a sentry checking the coast was clear, before finally entering the house and closing the door carefully, without making a sound. Even in the way he closed the door, I could see his discretion, his care not to attract attention, not to arouse the curiosity of neighbors like me. After she entered and he closed the door, I remained there at my window for over an hour and 40 minutes, completely mesmerized by the situation, waiting to see what would happen, when she would leave, what kind of goodbye they would have, if other people would show up. I was completely absorbed by this mystery that had taken up residence right next to my house. The lights in Miguel's house were on the entire time, especially those in the living room and kitchen, which are the rooms I can see best from my window. Through their light curtains, I could see shadows moving through the rooms, figures coming and going between spaces, demonstrating that there was a lot of activity going on inside the house. My imagination, which has always been very fertile and creative since childhood, began to work at full speed, creating 1,001 possibilities to explain the entire situation I was witnessing. Was it an extramarital affair? A secret, forbidden affair Miguel was having while Carmen was carefree traveling to visit family? Or was it some kind of private consulting firm, a specialized professional providing specific services in person? Perhaps a therapeutic massage therapist, an alternative therapist, a private tutor in some field I'd never even imagined existed, or perhaps something more serious and complicated, like a lawyer handling secret business dealings, an accountant solving confidential financial matters, or even something related to illicit activities I'd never even considered. My mind was racing, creating increasingly elaborate and dramatic theories. Every shadow I saw moving past their windows fueled my curiosity and suspicions. It was as if I'd unintentionally become a private detective, observing every detail, every movement, every change in my neighbor's normal routine. The mysterious woman stayed at Miguel's house for exactly 1 hour and 55 minutes. I timed it on the clock on the wall in my living room because I was completely obsessed with understanding the situation. When she finally left, I was almost dozing off in my armchair, but the distinctive sound of the wooden door opening jolted me awake, making my heart race again. I ran to the window once more, taking even greater care not to make a sound, not to turn on any lights that might give away my presence as a spy. And I caught the entire farewell scene between the two. It was a long, warm farewell, full of conversation and displays of affection that left me even more intrigued about the true nature of their relationship. They chatted at the door for a few more minutes, and during this conversation, I noticed something that really caught my attention and heightened my curiosity. She was carrying the same large brown leather bag she'd brought upon arrival, but now it seemed noticeably heavier, fuller, and bulkier. She had to shift her handbag several times during the conversation, clearly because the weight was bothering her, and at one point she even put the bag on the floor to rest her arms. This left me completely intrigued. What had she put in that bag during those nearly 2 hours she spent inside the house? What had she taken from Miguel's house? Were they important documents? Money? Valuables? Or perhaps some kind of material related to the work or service she was providing? My curious mind couldn't stop creating possibilities to explain this change in the bag's weight. After she got into the car and started the engine of that imported vehicle, Miguel stood at the door for a considerable time, watching her car slowly drive away down the street, wet from the still falling rain. He remained there for almost 10 minutes, staring in the direction she'd gone, with an expression on his face that I couldn't fully decipher due to the distance and the dim light from the street lamp. His expression seemed to be a mix of contradictory feelings. He looked simultaneously pleased and worried, relieved and anxious, happy and thoughtful. It was as if he'd just solved a major problem, but was simultaneously worried about the consequences or the next steps of some complex plan. When he finally closed the door and turned off the porch light, I stood there at my window for another half hour, obsessively wondering what the hell had happened in those 2 hours they'd spent together inside the house. That night, girls, I simply couldn't sleep. I stayed in bed until almost 4 in the morning, tossing and turning, staring at the dark ceiling of my room, listening to every noise of the night, with that situation hammering in my head like a catchy tune that refused to leave my mind. My mind couldn't shut off, couldn't stop processing everything I'd seen, couldn't stop creating theories and possibilities to explain that mysterious encounter. The next day, which was Saturday, I woke up at 5:30 in the morning with that situation completely occupying my thoughts. During breakfast, which I ate at the kitchen table from where I had a perfect side view of Miguel's house, I watched closely for any unusual movement, any sign that something extraordinary and out of the ordinary had happened the night before. Carmen hadn't yet returned from her trip to the interior of Minas Gerais. She always lets me know when she'll be back, and I knew she wouldn't be back until Tuesday of the following week. Miguel seemed to be acting normally on the surface, but I, with my new obsession with observing every detail, began to notice things that had previously gone unnoticed. He was watering the garden plants with that green hose he always uses, reading the morning paper on the wooden porch, as he's done religiously every Saturday since retiring, and drinking coffee from his favorite blue mug with a bird motif. But there was something different about his demeanor, something subtle that only a keen observer like me could detect. He seemed more satisfied with himself, more confident, as if he'd solved some important problem or made a wise decision. There was a slight smile at the corner of his mouth as he read the newspaper, an air of tranquility and satisfaction that hadn't been present in the previous few days. I decided I absolutely had to find out more about this mysterious story, because curiosity was literally consuming me, slowly, keeping me awake, making me lose my appetite, and making me agitated and anxious in a way I'd never experienced before. I began paying close attention to Miguel's schedule and activities, turning into a true amateur private detective, observing every movement, every change in routine, every detail that might give me clues as to what was really going on. I even made a special notebook, one of those hardcover ones I bought at the stationery store downtown, where I began meticulously recording every strange movement I observed, every unusual behavior, every detail that caught my attention. I wrote down specific times, detailed descriptions of the clothes he wore, changes in behavior, people passing by on the street, unusual cars parked near the house, everything that might be relevant to unraveling the mystery that had taken over my life. And it was through these systematic observations that I noticed a very clear and revealing pattern. He always looked better dressed, smelled better, and took more care with his appearance on the days Carmen wasn't home. On normal days when Carmen was around, Miguel wore his usual casual clothes, an old faded t-shirt, worn-out shorts, flip-flops, that completely relaxed look of a retired man with no important commitments or a specific time to arrive anywhere. But in the days leading up to these mysterious visits, he would begin a ritual of grooming and preparation that completely contrasted with his usual demeanor. He took impressive care with his appearance. A crisply ironed dress shirt without a single crease, dark dress pants tailored to his figure, closed-toe shoes clean and shiny like a mirror, impeccably gelled hair, a meticulously trimmed beard that left his face smooth and fragrant, and especially that expensive, imported perfume that I could smell even from here at home when the night breeze blew in his favor. Throughout that first week of March, after the mysterious woman's first appearance, I watched like a night owl, noting every movement, every change, every detail that might give me clues about what was happening. Early Monday morning, I witnessed something that caught my attention and further fueled my suspicions that something extraordinary was being planned. Miguel left the house looking more dressed up than usual. Not quite as dressed up as he was on a Friday night, but definitely more careful with his appearance than he usually is on a regular basis. He returned about 2 hours later, carrying several large bags from various stores around town. This wasn't just regular grocery shopping, which Carmen usually does, because she's very organized and always prepares a detailed list of everything she needs to buy. He brought bags from several different places, from the specialty butcher shop on the main avenue, where they sell prime meats and imported products, from the organic market that runs on Mondays in the city center, from the compounding pharmacy in the upscale neighborhood, and, this particularly intrigued me, even a large bag from the most expensive pet shop in the city, the one on the Antiques Avenue that sells imported pet products. On Tuesday, I witnessed something even more unusual and out of character from Miguel. He literally spent the entire afternoon tidying and organizing the house in a way I'd never, ever seen in all the years we've been neighbors. It was a professional-level cleaning and organization, as if he were preparing to welcome a very important, very special guest, someone he wanted to make a great first impression on. He meticulously vacuumed all the carpets in the house, cleaned all the windows inside and out until they gleamed like crystal in the afternoon sun, completely organized the living room by moving furniture around to create a more welcoming and harmonious environment, replaced all the curtains with cleaner, brighter, and more elegant ones, swept and washed the entire front walkway, and even carefully pruned the plants and shrubs in the garden that were a little overgrown and unkempt. On Wednesday, he did something that left me completely speechless with his dedication and care. He took his car to be washed and waxed at the most expensive gas station in town, the one that offers premium services and is known for leaving vehicles impeccable. His silver Corolla, which normally sits a bit dusty in the garage because he rarely uses it, usually just to go to the grocery store or visit relatives, came home completely transformed. The car was shining like new, vacuumed inside with attention to every detail, the leather seats conditioned and scented, the windows crystal clear without a single stain or mark. Even the tires were black and shiny from special cleaning and maintenance products. For a man who normally only washes his car once a month, always at the simple gas station on the corner, That dedication and special investment seemed extremely suspicious and significant to me. Thursday was the most interesting and revealing day of the entire week. I was at the window of my bedroom, which is on the second floor of the house, and offers a privileged view of Miguel's backyard, when I observed something that left me completely intrigued and full of theories about what might be happening. I saw Miguel carefully and meticulously working on something near the old abandoned chicken coop in the far corner of his yard. That coop hasn't been used in years, ever since they stopped raising chickens, and it usually sits somewhat neglected, covered in dead leaves and cobwebs. But that day, he was paying special attention to that area. He crouched there for almost an hour and a half, working on something I couldn't see clearly due to the distance and the bushes in the way. He seemed to be searching for something very specific, or perhaps tidying, organizing, or preparing something very important. His dedication and concentration were total, as if this were a crucial task that required all his care and attention. From where I was watching, I couldn't see exactly what he was doing, but from his body posture and repetitive movements, it seemed like something that required delicacy, patience, and specialized knowledge. He constantly rose and fell, moved his hands in careful movements, and sometimes stood still for minutes, observing something, as if analyzing or assessing some delicate situation. On Friday, I was on high alert, fully prepared for a new session of observation and investigation. Since mid-afternoon, I'd been strategically positioned in my favorite armchair in the living room, the one with the best view of Miguel's house. I'd been equipped with a large thermos filled with strong coffee to keep me alert all night long, a plate of tapioca cookies I always make on Fridays, which are delicious with coffee, and even a small pair of binoculars I'd bought years ago for bird watching in the municipal park, which were now proving very useful for my domestic investigation. I was fully prepared for a serious, professional, detailed investigation, and wouldn't you know it, at 8:30 o'clock sharp, exactly the same time as the previous week, she appeared again. This time I was fully prepared and was able to observe a much greater amount of detail, capturing nuances that had gone unnoticed in the first observation. The mysterious woman arrived driving the same car as the week before, a dark imported sedan that appeared to be very well maintained and expensive. She parked in exactly the same spot in front of Miguel's gate and got out with the same confident, elegant, and determined demeanor as before. But this time, with my binoculars and my increased attention, I was able to observe many more details about her appearance and behavior. I could get a better look at the clothes she was wearing, an elegant navy blue dress that reached her knees, cut in a very sophisticated way, and that perfectly highlighted her figure. Black low-heeled shoes made of genuine leather that seemed to be an expensive brand, a brown leather jacket over the dress that perfectly matched her bag, and she was carrying the same large brown leather bag as last time, which again seemed to be quite full and heavy from the care with which she handled it. Her hair was styled differently this time. Instead of loose as on the first occasion, it was tied back in an elegant and sophisticated bun, with a few strategically loose strands framing her face in a very feminine and charming way. She wore prescription glasses with discreet modern frames, which gave her a more serious, professional, and intellectual air. She didn't look at all like a woman getting ready for a secret romantic rendezvous, you know? She looked much more like someone heading to a work appointment, to take care of some important professional matter, to take care of some serious business that required competence and seriousness. When Miguel opened the door the second time, I could observe the dynamic of their greeting much more clearly. They greeted each other warmly and affectionately. That was undeniable, but not in an overly affectionate or romantic way. It was a greeting that demonstrated familiarity and genuine affection, but one that had more of a family relationship or close friendship than a romantic relationship. She entered the house quickly, without ceremony, and this time I could see through the living room window, which had the curtains half open, probably due to their carelessness, that she immediately pulled something out of her bag in the entryway. It was clearly some kind of specialized equipment or instrument, something silver and shiny that caught the light from the living room chandelier brightly as she lifted it and placed it on the coffee table. This information left me even more confused and curious than I already was. What kind of professional equipment was this? Why did she need to bring specialized instruments to Miguel's house? My mind, already working at top speed trying to decipher this mystery, began to imagine even more elaborate and specific possibilities. Could she be a professional in some kind of alternative or clandestine medical service? A dentist who provided special home visits? A beautician highly specialized in specific procedures? A physiotherapist or alternative therapist using special and unique equipment? During this second visit from the mysterious woman, I observed much more intense and coordinated movement throughout the house. They didn't just stay in the living room, as I had first imagined. First, they remained in the living room for about half an hour, apparently organizing and preparing something. Then they moved together to what appeared to be Miguel's office, which is at the back of the house and which I can partially see from my bathroom window when I position myself at the right angle. From there, I could only see their shadows projected onto the office's light curtains. But these shadows told a very interesting story. It seemed they were working together on some very specific activity that required complete concentration, as the shadows remained bent over the office desk for long periods, as if they were analyzing important documents, examining delicate objects, or performing some kind of complex procedure that required special attention and care. After about an hour of working in the office, they returned to the living room, and it was at that moment that I noticed something truly intriguing that further fueled my theories about what might be going on in that house. Miguel left alone through the back door of the house. I could follow his movements through the lit kitchen window and headed directly to that specific corner of the backyard where I had seen him working and tinkering the previous Thursday. He remained in that spot for several minutes, apparently searching for something very specific, with the aid of a small flashlight he'd brought from the house. I observed him repeatedly bending down and getting up, carefully moving around something I couldn't identify, and appearing to be capturing, collecting, or retrieving some object or material that was hidden or stored in that spot. When he returned to the house, I could clearly see through the lit living room window that he was carrying something small and delicate in his hands, something that appeared to be carefully wrapped in a light towel or soft cloth. The mysterious woman was waiting patiently for him in the living room, and when he arrived with the mysterious object, they immediately gathered together and leaned over the coffee table to examine together, very carefully, whatever it was he had brought from the backyard. The mysterious woman's second visit lasted considerably longer than the first, almost 3 full hours. By the time she finally prepared to leave, it was almost 15 past midnight. They again had a lengthy conversation at the door, but this time I noticed a significant change in their behavior and body language. She seemed visibly more satisfied, more relieved and calmer than when she'd arrived. Her shoulders were more relaxed, her face was serene and satisfied, and her general posture was that of someone who had successfully solved a major problem or completed a difficult task. It was a radical change from the tension and worry I'd observed upon her arrival. Miguel also seemed significantly calmer and more content when he said goodbye to her. During their farewell conversation at the door, he smiled several times, genuinely and relaxedly, demonstrating a relief and gratitude that were palpable even from a distance. They even hugged briefly before she got into the car, an embrace that left me even more intrigued about the true nature of their relationship. Was it a hug of deep gratitude, of familial affection, of relief at having resolved some complicated issue? Or was it something more intimate and personal that I couldn't fully grasp? After she left and her car disappeared into the darkness of the street, Miguel stood on the porch for almost 15 minutes, and that's when I witnessed something that completely surprised me, and something I'd never seen in all the years we'd been neighbors. He lit a cigarette and stood there, smoking slowly, exhaling into the night air, gazing thoughtfully at the starry sky. This absolutely shocked me, because I had never ever seen Miguel smoke before. Carmem always proudly commented to her neighbors that her husband was an example of healthy living, that he'd never had any vices like smoking or drinking, that he took care of his health and stayed in shape even into his 60s. Seeing him there, inhaling slowly and thoughtfully, made me think that perhaps this whole mysterious situation was generating a lot of stress, anxiety, and nervousness, leading him to seek some kind of relief or escape he'd never needed before. His posture while smoking was that of someone mentally processing something very important, someone with a lot to think and reflect on. He looked up at the sky, sometimes closing his eyes for a few seconds, sometimes shaking his head as if he were talking to himself or making important decisions about some complex situation. That night, girls, I literally couldn't sleep a wink. I stayed in bed until almost 5 in the morning, tossing and turning like a fish out of water, staring at the dark ceiling of my room, listening to every little noise of the night, with the whole situation hammering incessantly in my head like a catchy song that simply refuses to leave my mind. My mind couldn't shut off, couldn't stop processing and reprocessing everything I'd seen, couldn't stop creating and recreating increasingly elaborate and dramatic theories to explain these mysterious encounters that were happening right next door to my house. It was as if my brain had become a theory-making machine, working tirelessly to fit together all the pieces of this complex and intriguing puzzle. Every detail I observed became a potential clue. Every gesture I witnessed took on multiple and profound meanings. Every unusual behavior further fueled my insatiable curiosity and my growing suspicions that something very important and secret was going on in my neighbor Miguel's life. Was it an elaborate and carefully planned extramarital affair? A complicated and dangerous love affair that needed to be kept absolutely secret? Or was it some kind of illegal business? Some clandestine activity that required complete discretion and special care? Perhaps emotional or financial blackmail? Or perhaps something related to forged documents, money laundering, or the smuggling of valuables? Or simply something my overactive and curious imagination was transforming into mystery and drama, when in fact it was something completely innocent, normal, and explainable. Guys, my mind simply couldn't stop working, creating possibilities, imagining scenarios, trying to connect the dots and form a coherent theory that explained everything I was observing. It was an obsession that was taking over my life, my routine, my thoughts, and even my dreams. At 5:30 in the morning, I was already up, wide awake and excited, making my first coffee of the day in an Italian coffee maker I bought years ago that makes the most delicious coffee in the world. I sat at the kitchen table from where I have that privileged side view of Miguel's house, drinking strong hot coffee while obsessively watching for any unusual movement, any telltale sign that something extraordinary and out of the ordinary had indeed happened the night before. Miguel appeared on his porch around 6:30, as he always does on Saturdays, to pick up the newspaper the delivery man leaves at the gate. But even in this routine activity, I noticed subtle changes in his behavior that fueled my curiosity even more. He seemed in a better mood, more satisfied with himself, more confident and calm. There was a subtle but genuine smile on his face as he flipped through the pages of the newspaper, an air of serenity and satisfaction that contrasted with the tension and worry I had observed in the days leading up to the mysterious visit. All weekend long, I tried a more direct and investigative approach. On Sunday morning, when I met Miguel at the bakery on the corner, the family-owned place where I always buy my freshly baked French bread, and where Mr. Joachim, who's owned the place for over 20 years, always has the best neighborhood gossip and news. I subtly tried to bring up the subject of his family and personal life to see if he'd mention any recent visitors, any special events, any new people in his life, or any unusual circumstances that might explain these mysterious visits. I began the conversation completely naturally and unpretentiously, commenting on how lovely that sunny Sunday was, how the bakery always smelled and welcoming, and how Mr. Joachim makes the best bread in town. Then, very subtly, I steered the conversation toward more personal matters. I talked about how I missed Carmem, who had always been a dear neighbor and a constant presence in the neighborhood. I mentioned that I'd noticed the lights in his house staying on later in the past few weeks. I carefully asked if everything was okay with him, if he wasn't feeling lonely or in need of any help or company while his wife was away. I also tried, very discreetly, to ask about his health, whether he was sleeping well, whether he wasn't worried about anything, and whether anything special or unusual had happened that might be affecting his normal routine. Very carefully and delicately, I mentioned that I'd occasionally heard unusual noises coming from the street during the night, cars stopping, voices talking, movement outside of normal hours, and asked if he'd noticed anything, or if he knew of any new neighbors who had moved into the area recently. But he was visibly evasive, uncomfortable, and defensive throughout our conversation. He responded with monosyllables, forced smiles, and abrupt changes of subject whenever I broached topics that might have something to do with the mysterious visitors. When I specifically mentioned that I'd heard cars arriving and departing from our street during the night, he became visibly nervous and uncomfortable, stuttered a bit, looked away, and quickly said it must be a neighbor coming home late from work or visiting relatives. This clearly defensive and evasive behavior only served to exponentially increase my suspicions that something truly important, secret, and potentially complicated was going on in his life. A person with nothing to hide doesn't get nervous and defensive when asked innocent questions about the daily routine of the house. Right, girls? The third week of my investigation was particularly interesting and revealing in terms of behavioral patterns. Carmen returned from her trip on Tuesday afternoon, as she always does, arriving with those large plaid suitcases full of dirty clothes and several brown paper bags filled with traditional sweets, artisanal cheeses, homemade sausages, and other delicious products she always brings from farms in the interior of Minas Gerais to distribute among neighbors and friends. I watched with rapt attention the warm and affectionate welcome Miguel extended to his wife as she returned from her trip. There were long, tight hugs, tender kisses on the cheek and forehead, solicitous and dedicated help with all the heavy luggage, that special and careful attention of a husband who truly missed his wife and was genuinely happy about her return home. It was a public and spontaneous display of marital affection that seemed completely authentic and natural. Throughout that week, while Carmen was at home, resuming her normal routine as a dedicated housewife, no mysterious women appeared at their house. Absolutely no strange visitors, no unusual cars parked on the street, no suspicious or unusual activity. Miguel completely returned to his normal, quiet routine as a retired married man, watching television snuggled up on the couch next to his wife during the evening soap operas, taking morning walks hand in hand around the neighborhood, hosting retired friends for dominoes and Sunday morning soccer on the porch. Gone were the special, elaborate preparations I'd observed in the previous weeks, the extravagant perfume and meticulous grooming, and the tension and anxiety that were palpable in his behavior when Carmen was away. It was as if his wife's presence at home made the whole mysterious situation simply disappear, as if it were put on hold or suspended until a new opportunity arose. But the following Friday, when Carmen left home again to visit a dear friend who was hospitalized at the municipal hospital with health problems, there was the mysterious woman once again, punctual as a Swiss watch. This time she arrived even earlier than before, at exactly 8 o'clock in the evening, and I immediately noticed that she was carrying even more equipment and materials than on previous visits. In addition to the large brown leather bag that had become familiar, she carried a smaller rectangular case, the kind medical and veterinary professionals typically use to transport specialized and delicate instruments, and a white plastic bag that appeared to contain several objects of varying sizes and shapes. It was clearly a larger quantity of equipment and materials, which made me wonder if perhaps this time they were going to perform a more complex, time-consuming, or important procedure than on previous occasions. Ladies, this third visit was completely different from all the others I'd witnessed up until that point. There was a palpable urgency, a special tension in their behavior that I hadn't observed on previous occasions. It was as if something important had happened, some situation that required immediate attention and special care. Miguel opened the front door before she even finished climbing the 3 low steps of the front stairs, as if he'd been waiting anxiously for her since early afternoon, counting the minutes until she arrived. They didn't even chat at the door as they had the other times. She entered the house directly and quickly, like someone arriving to respond to an emergency, to resolve a situation that couldn't wait another minute. The haste and urgency were so evident that even I, observing from a distance, could sense the tension in the air. It was as if they were racing against time, as if there was some important deadline to meet or some delicate situation that needed to be resolved with maximum speed and efficiency. This time, I was able to observe what was happening inside the house in much greater clarity and detail, as they apparently forgot to completely close the living room curtains, probably because they were in a rush and preoccupied with other, more pressing matters. The mysterious woman immediately placed all her belongings on the coffee table and began meticulously organizing various objects she'd removed from her bags and briefcase. They were definitely instruments of some kind, because they all gleamed brightly when the chandelier's light fell upon them, and she arranged them very neatly and systematically on the table, as if it were a complete professional kit, specialized for some kind of technical work, requiring precision, specialized knowledge, and appropriate equipment. The organization was meticulous, with each instrument having its specific place, as if she had done this many times before, and knew exactly how to set everything up as efficiently as possible. Miguel actively collaborated in this preparation, demonstrating that he too knew exactly what needed to be done. He brought a large, completely white, clean bath towel from the kitchen, the kind we use for special occasions, and carefully spread it over a specific part of the coffee table, as if preparing a suitable, clean and sterilized surface for some kind of delicate procedure that required special hygiene and cleanliness. They worked together on this initial preparation with perfect synchrony, a coordination that clearly demonstrated that this wasn't the first time they'd undertaken this specific activity. Each knew exactly what their role was, what needed to be done, and where to find everything they needed. It was a fluid and natural cooperation that suggested prior experience and careful planning. The movement in the house was extremely intense and coordinated throughout this third visit. They moved constantly between the living room, the kitchen, and the back office, carrying various objects and materials, talking in low but clearly animated and focused tones, demonstrating a kind of familiarity, cooperation, and partnership that increasingly intrigued me and fueled my theories about the nature of their relationship. At one point, which left a deep impression on me and made my heart race with anxiety and curiosity, I saw Miguel carefully carrying something in his arms, completely wrapped in a small light-colored blanket. The delicate and careful way he carried the object made it seem very fragile, precious, or important. The attention and care with which he handled it were impressive, as if it were something that could easily be damaged if not handled with extreme care. My imagination, already working at full speed, immediately began creating increasingly dramatic and elaborate scenarios to explain what might be happening. Was it some valuable object being examined, evaluated, or repaired? Some important document requiring special care? Or perhaps something related to illegal activities I couldn't even imagine? The possibilities seemed endless, and each one further fueled my obsession with uncovering the truth. Please, girls, don't leave the video now, because what I discover in the coming weeks will surprise you in ways you can't even imagine. This story has such an incredible, unexpected, and touching twist that it will completely change everything you think about this situation. The truth is much more beautiful, much more moving, and much more meaningful than any dramatic theory I had created in my imagination. During that third mysterious visit, there was a particularly intriguing and tense moment that literally left my heart in my throat with anxiety and curiosity. It was around 10 o'clock at night when I saw Miguel quickly and with palpable urgency exit the back door of the house, crossing the backyard, illuminated only by the yellowish light coming from the kitchen window, and heading with determined steps to that specific, secluded corner of the yard where I had seen him working and carefully tinkering the previous Thursday. He remained crouched in that spot for several minutes, clearly searching for something very specific and important with the aid of a small LED flashlight he'd brought from the house. I noticed his movements were careful but urgent, as if he knew exactly what he was looking for, but at the same time worried about some time factor or some condition that might change if he took too long. His concentration was total, absolute. He would bend down, delicately fiddle with something I couldn't identify, stand up to take a better look, then bend down again, repeating these movements over and over, as if performing some delicate task requiring precision and specialized knowledge. It was like watching someone searching for something very small and valuable, or perhaps caring for something fragile that required special attention. When he finally returned to the house, I could clearly see through the well-lit living room window that he was carrying something small and seemingly very delicate in his hands. The object seemed to be moving slightly, which made me think it might be something alive, something breathing and moving. My heart raced even more at this possibility, and my mind began to race even faster, trying to understand what it could be. The mysterious woman waited patiently in the living room, with some instruments already prepared and arranged on the table. When he arrived carrying the mysterious object, they immediately gathered around the coffee table. She carefully used a kind of professional magnifying glass, or magnifying instrument, the kind used by doctors and other specialized professionals, to examine very small or delicate objects in detail. Their concentration during this examination was absolutely total and impressive. They worked together for over an hour on this analysis or procedure, with the woman carefully manipulating the object, while Miguel held a small flashlight to provide additional, more targeted illumination. It was clearly very delicate, very important work, requiring not only technical precision, but also specialized knowledge and specific experience. The seriousness and focus with which they approached the entire situation made me realize definitively that this wasn't something casual, superficial, or unimportant. It was something that truly mattered to them both, some activity that held special meaning and justified all that care, all that preparation, and all that dedication of time and energy. This third visit lasted until almost 1 a.m, making it by far the longest I'd ever witnessed. When she finally prepared to leave, I could clearly see that both she and Miguel seemed completely relieved, satisfied, and at peace with the results of the work they'd done all those hours. Miguel even smiled for the first time in all the times I'd observed them together, a genuine, spontaneous smile, radiant with profound relief and sincere gratitude. It was obvious that something very important had been successfully resolved, Some serious problem had found a solution, some worry that had been consuming his energy, and attention had finally been eliminated. The mysterious woman also demonstrated clear signs of professional and personal satisfaction. Her demeanor was that of someone who had successfully accomplished an important mission, who had used her knowledge and skills to resolve a truly important situation. It was clear that she felt fulfilled and satisfied with the work she had just completed. During their farewell, which was much longer and more warm than on all the other occasions, they talked at the door for almost 15 minutes. During this final conversation, I noticed that she handed Miguel something important. It appeared to be some folded papers or perhaps a small, discreet envelope. He received it with great care and gratitude, immediately putting it in his shirt pocket, as if it were something extremely valuable and important that could never be lost, forgotten, or damaged. The farewell hug between the two was significantly longer, warmer, and more emotional than the previous times. It was clearly a hug of deep thanks, sincere gratitude, mutual relief, and satisfaction for a job well done and a mission successfully accomplished. There was genuine emotion in that embrace that was palpable even from a distance. After her departure, I noticed that Miguel's behavior was completely different from his previous appearances. Instead of nervously smoking on the porch as he had on the second visit, he quickly returned to the house and immediately turned on the lights in the office, where he remained for over an hour. From the shadows cast on the office curtains, it was clear he was sitting at his desk, examining with great care whatever she had handed him. He was clearly reading and rereading some document, taking careful notes, studying important information, processing data, or instructions that were crucial to something. It was obvious that those papers or documents contained crucial information, specific instructions, or detailed guidelines that he needed to fully understand and follow. The dedication and attention with which he studied that material were impressive, demonstrating how meaningful and valuable it was to him. The following week, I began to notice very significant and noticeable changes in Miguel's overall behavior. Changes that made me even more curious and intrigued about this whole mysterious situation I'd been following for so many weeks. He seemed like a completely different person, as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders, as if a constant worry that had been consuming his energy and tranquility had finally been resolved definitively and satisfactorily. He returned to greeting all his neighbors with that warm, genuine, and welcoming smile that had always been a defining characteristic of his personality, but which had completely disappeared during those tense weeks of secret visits and mysterious behavior. It was as if he had regained his natural joy, his spontaneity, and his ability to interact normally with the people around him. His garden, which had been somewhat neglected and abandoned during those weeks of worry and tension, once again received his loving, dedicated, and constant daily attention. He resumed his morning routine of carefully watering each plant, checking to see if any needed special care, pruning overgrown branches, cleaning away dead leaves, and talking lovingly to the flowers, as he always did before this whole situation began. It was as if he had solved a very serious, very complicated, and very important problem, and could finally breathe a sigh of relief and resume his normal life. The transformation in his behavior was so evident and striking that even other neighbors on the block began to comment among themselves about how Miguel looked visibly better, more rested, calmer, and happier. He returned to wearing his favorite casual clothes, without any particular concern for appearance, returned to walking barefoot around the house and yard as he always loved to do, returned to listening to his old songs on the porch while tending the plants, returned to whistling cheerful tunes during his household chores. It was a complete return to the normalcy, spontaneity, and tranquility that had always characterized his relaxed and contented personality. Carmen also immediately noticed the extremely positive change in her husband's mood and behavior when he returned from his next trip. I watched them chatting animatedly in the garden on a pleasant sunny Sunday afternoon, sitting comfortably in those blue plastic chairs they always strategically place beneath the cool shade of the large mango tree in the center of the yard. She seemed genuinely curious and interested in his renewed good humor, his regained calm, and his evident joy. She asked loving questions, touched his arm tenderly during their conversation, and laughed spontaneously at the funny things he told her, demonstrating how happy she was to see her husband relaxed and content again. Miguel was explaining something to her with great enthusiasm, excitement, and satisfaction. He gestured expressively with his hands, smiled constantly and genuinely, and spoke in an animated and engaging manner, clearly relieved and happy to finally be able to share with his wife some important information that had been a closely guarded secret and a source of concern for several weeks. Carmen listened to everything with full attention and genuine interest, nodding her head in agreement and understanding, sometimes placing her hand on her chest in clear signs of surprise or deep emotion, clearly demonstrating that whatever he was saying was truly important, meaningful, touching, and exciting for both of them. It was precisely during this intimate and warm conversation in the garden that I managed to hear some stray words, some fragments of sentences that began to give me the first real, concrete, and revealing clues about the mystery that had completely consumed my curiosity, my attention, and my thoughts for so long. Since my house is literally glued to theirs, separated only by a low wooden fence, and the windows are very close together, especially when the wind is blowing in the favorable direction and carrying the sounds clearly, I managed to capture several important fragments of the conversation that made me begin to completely rethink all the elaborate, dramatic, and complicated theories I had created during weeks of observation and speculation. I clearly heard Miguel mention very specific words like finally, cured, veterinarian, no longer suffering. She was so afraid of losing her. Now she's completely fine. It was a miracle. She saved a life. My brain, which had spent weeks creating complex theories about extramarital affairs, secret business dealings, illegal activities, and forbidden relationships, suddenly began making completely different connections. Connections I hadn't even considered before at any point in my investigation. Veterinarian? Could it be that this whole mysterious situation, all those secret and carefully planned visits, all those shiny instruments and delicate procedures, all that worry and tension I had observed, had a completely innocent, beneficial, and touching explanation? Had I allowed my curious imagination and my flair for the dramatic to create a vast and complicated mystery, where in reality there was only a simple and beautiful story of care, compassion, and love for animals? That night, I stayed up very late, reflecting intensely on these new, revealing clues and completely reinterpreting all the observations I'd made over the previous weeks from a completely new and different perspective. I began rethinking every detail, every behavior, every object I'd seen, trying to fit it all into an explanation much simpler, much more innocent, and much more beautiful than all the dramatic theories I had created. The shiny instruments the woman carefully carried in her large bag could easily have been specialized veterinary instruments. Stethoscopes for listening to the heart and lungs, delicate tweezers for precise procedures, syringes for administering medication, special thermometers for measuring body temperature, surgical scissors for cutting bandages, specific medications for complex treatments. The sheer urgency and absolute focus they demonstrated during their visits could be directly related to the careful and dedicated treatment of a sick, injured, or weakened animal that required specialized medical care, constant professional attention, and regular veterinary monitoring during a delicate and important recovery period. The small, delicate object that Miguel carefully brought from the backyard that emergency night could have been an injured animal, perhaps a small cat, a puppy, an injured bird, or any other small creature that had appeared in the backyard in need of urgent medical help and expert veterinary care to survive and fully recover. The clean white tablecloth he meticulously spread over the coffee table could have been used to create a suitable, hygienic, and sterile environment for veterinary examinations, minor surgical procedures, medication administration, or any other type of medical care that needed to be performed in a clean and organized manner. The more I thought about this new possibility, this much simpler and much more human explanation, the more absolutely everything made sense. The complete discretion and concern for privacy could simply be to prevent curious neighbors like me from becoming involved in a delicate animal care situation, especially if it was an injured animal that needed complete tranquility to recover properly. The regularity of visits could be related to veterinary treatment that required constant, careful, and professional monitoring, with regular appointments to check on the evolution of the health condition, change dressings, administer medications, provide physiotherapy, or any other type of care that recovering animals require over prolonged periods. But there were still some important pieces of the puzzle that I needed to fit together to fully understand the situation. Who exactly was this veterinarian who demonstrated so much knowledge, dedication, and care? Why did Miguel seem so worried and secretive about the appointments if it was simply a matter of veterinary care? Why could she only show up when Carmen wasn't home? And most importantly, what specific type of animal was being treated, and why had this entire situation caused Miguel so much stress, worry, and anxiety for all those weeks? These questions continued to intrigue me deeply, but I finally felt I was on the right path to uncovering the full and real truth about this entire mysterious situation. The radical and positive change in Miguel's behavior after the mysterious woman's last visit clearly indicated that some serious problem, some important concern, and some delicate situation had been resolved with complete and definitive success. It was obvious that something that had been causing a lot of worry, anxiety, and tension for several weeks had finally found a positive solution, a happy outcome, and a satisfactory result that allowed Miguel to return to his normal life, his usual tranquility, and his natural joy. During the following days, I further intensified my discreet and careful observation, paying special attention to any sound, movement, or indication that could confirm the presence of an animal in Miguel's house and validate my new theory about this entire mysterious situation that had dominated my thoughts for so long. I began to listen with redoubled attention and total concentration, trying to identify soft barks, faint meows, bird calls, or any other characteristic animal sound that could definitively confirm my new theory and give me the peace of mind to finally understand what was really happening in that house. On Thursday of that week, as I was hanging my freshly washed clothes on the clothesline in the backyard, enjoying the lovely afternoon sun that naturally dries and perfumes clothes, I heard a very quiet, almost inaudible sound, clearly coming from the direction of Miguel's house. It was a sound I recognized immediately, but it seemed completely strange and unexpected coming from that house where, in all the years we'd lived together, there had never been a pet. It was a faint, delicate, and somewhat hoarse meow, like that of a small young cat, or perhaps one still recovering from some health issue that affected its normal vocalization ability. My heart immediately raced because I was finally finding concrete, tangible, and definitive evidence to confirm my new theory about this whole mysterious situation. It was the first real physical and incontrovertible proof that there really was an animal in Miguel's house, and that all my new deductions about veterinary care, medical treatments, and animal recovery were correct. It was a feeling of relief mixed with satisfaction to finally discover the truth after so much time speculating and theorizing. But before I could further investigate this important discovery and try to confirm more details about the animal being cared for, something happened that would completely change the entire dynamic of the situation and give me the definitive opportunity to discover the whole truth about this mystery that had consumed my life for so many weeks. The following Friday, when I was fully prepared and waiting for the mysterious woman to appear again to continue treating the animal I now knew existed, she simply didn't come. I remained in my usual observation position until almost midnight, vigilant and attentive, but no cars arrived, no visitors came, no special activity occurred at Miguel's house. The same pattern repeated itself the following week, and the next, and the next. The mysterious visits simply stopped happening, disappeared completely, as if the treatment had been completed successfully, or as if the animal had fully recovered and no longer required regular specialized veterinary care. Miguel continued to display that relieved, calm, and satisfied air that had appeared after the mysterious woman's last visit, which made me firmly believe that the situation had been resolved in a positive, satisfactory, and definitive way for everyone involved. The opportunity to finally discover the whole truth about this mystery that had completely consumed my curiosity, my attention, and my thoughts for so many weeks appeared completely unexpectedly and by chance on a sunny and quiet Thursday afternoon the following month. I was at home, methodically organizing my winter clothes closet and separating the pieces that needed to be washed, repaired, or donated to charity, when I suddenly remembered that I was still saving a large pressure cooker that Carmem had lent me the week before to make a special, elaborate feijoada for the visit of some dear relatives who had come from another city. The pot was completely clean, dry and shiny, stored in my kitchen cupboard, and I knew Carmen probably needed it to prepare the Sunday lunch she always makes for the family. I carefully picked up the pot, crossed the small yard separating our houses, and rang the front doorbell as I always do when I need to talk to them. When Miguel opened the door, we greeted each other naturally as we always do, chatting briefly about the lovely weather, how Carmen was feeling after her last trip, and how lovely the afternoon sun was, warming the heart and brightening the day. But it was precisely when he kindly invited me in for a coffee, something I hadn't done in a long time because of the whole mysterious situation, that I finally heard a familiar, unmistakable, and revealing noise coming from inside the house. It was the absolutely unmistakable sound of a cat meowing, but it wasn't just any ordinary meow from a healthy, contented cat. It was the very specific and characteristic sound of a small, delicate cat with a hoarse, weak, and still somewhat weakened meow, as of an animal still gradually recovering from some serious health problem that had affected its vitality and ability to vocalize normally. Miguel immediately realized I'd heard the telltale sound and was visibly embarrassed, a little ashamed and clearly unsure of what he should do or say. He scratched his head nervously, smiled awkwardly like a child caught doing something innocent, and stood there in the doorway for a few seconds, clearly mentally deciding whether or not to tell me the whole truth about this mysterious situation I'd observed and speculated about for so many weeks. He hesitated for a few long, tense moments, looking at me with an expression that mixed embarrassment, gratitude for my discretion, and a certain relief at finally being able to share with someone the secret he had been keeping for so long. Then he sighed deeply, like someone who finally feels completely relieved at being able to share a burden they had been carrying alone for so long, and he warmly invited me into his home and personally experienced the true source of all the mystery that had intrigued, worried, and fascinated me during so many weeks of observation and speculation. In Miguel's cozy office, on a makeshift but very comfortable bed made of soft, clean blankets and old but well-preserved pillows, lay the most absolutely beautiful cat I've ever had the privilege of seeing in my entire life. He was a young, elegant Siamese, with those intense, bright blue eyes characteristic of this special breed, and a light, silky coat with well-defined dark edges. He was still clearly weakened and gradually recovering from some serious health problem that had left temporary scars. One of his hind legs was carefully wrapped in clean professional bandages, and it was completely obvious that he had recently undergone some kind of delicate surgery, complex medical treatment, or veterinary procedure that required specialized care and professional monitoring during a prolonged recovery period. Miguel then began to explain the whole true story to me, and my dear girls, you simply will not be able to believe how completely, utterly, and absurdly wrong I was about absolutely everything I had imagined, speculated, and theorized during all those weeks of obsessive observation. He told me, with a mixture of embarrassment at having kept it a secret, but also with a lot of genuine affection in his voice, that the cat had appeared injured, bruised, and in a pitiful state in his backyard approximately 5 weeks ago, on a terrible night of heavy rain and wind that had left the poor thing completely soaked, shivering from the cold, and clearly in great physical pain. The poor little thing had its hind leg visibly broken in at least 2 places, several deep cuts and bleeding all over its body, extremely thin and malnourished as if it hadn't eaten for many days, completely scared and traumatized. It had probably been hit by some vehicle and had managed to laboriously drag itself to Miguel's yard, desperately looking for some safe shelter, some protection from the rain, and perhaps some charitable soul who could help it in its desperate situation. Miguel, who has always had an extremely generous and sensitive heart for abandoned, injured, or suffering animals, didn't hesitate for a second to collect the weakened cat, immediately bring him home, and try to care for him as best his limited knowledge and goodwill allowed. But he quickly realized that the animal urgently needed specialized veterinary care, professional surgery to properly repair the broken paw, specific medications for pain and infection, and competent medical monitoring throughout the delicate recovery period. The problem was that taking the cat to a regular city vet would be extremely expensive for a retiree's tight budget, and he didn't know if the original owners would eventually show up to claim the cat, which could create legal problems or unnecessary embarrassment for the entire family. It was precisely at this moment of worry and uncertainty that he remembered Carla, his sister's beloved granddaughter, who had moved to another country a few years earlier to study veterinary medicine at a renowned and specialized university. By an absolutely incredible and providential coincidence, she had come at that very moment to participate in a series of lectures, conferences, and seminars on comparative veterinary medicine, and was spending an extended period here in the country studying the differences between animal treatment techniques, conducting academic research, and expanding her professional knowledge. Dear friends, can you believe this incredible turn of events? The mysterious woman I'd been obsessively watching for all those weeks, about whom I'd created the most outlandish, dramatic, and elaborate theories about extramarital affairs, secret business dealings, illegal activities, and forbidden relationships, was simply Carla, Miguel's devoted and beloved niece, a competent, caring, and dedicated veterinarian who was caring with all her love, professional knowledge, and personal dedication for an injured and abandoned cat who had appeared in desperate need of help to survive and recover. All my elaborate theories, all my dramatic suspicions, all the nights I lay awake imagining scandals, secrets, and betrayals, they were completely unfounded, unnecessary, and ridiculous. It was simply a beautiful, touching, and moving story of family charity, of unconditional love for animals, of genuine compassion for a helpless and suffering little creature who urgently needed professional help to have a second chance at life. Miguel explained with great affection and gratitude that he couldn't tell Carmem about the cat's presence in the house because she is unfortunately allergic to feline fur and cannot be around them for prolonged periods. When she is home and cats are around, she develops severe allergic reactions, constant and uncontrollable sneezing, intense itchy red and watery eyes, potentially life-threatening breathing difficulties, and other uncomfortable symptoms that can seriously compromise her health and well-being. For this medical and health reason, Carla could only come and professionally care for the injured cat when Carmem was traveling inland to completely avoid any risk of exposure to feline allergens that could cause discomfort, respiratory problems, or more serious health complications for her. The shiny instruments I had observed with such curiosity were actually professional and specialized veterinary instruments that Carla carefully brought to examine the cat thoroughly, change the bandages with proper technique, administer specific medications for pain and infection prevention, and perform gentle physical therapy sessions to help gradually and fully restore mobility to the broken paw. The long and drawn-out visits were perfectly explained by the fact that the cat required intensive, constant, and extremely careful care throughout the delicate recovery period. Treatment included meticulous cleaning of the wounds with specialized products, careful application of healing ointments, special physiotherapy exercises to maintain joint mobility, therapeutic massages to stimulate blood circulation, precise administration of pain medication, and infection prevention. And above all, a lot of affection, attention, and patience to help the animal regain its trust in humans and its will to live. Carla's always heavy and full bag contained all the necessary medications, specialized veterinary instruments, sterile dressings, vitamin supplements to strengthen the immune system, special food for recovering animals, and all other essential materials for complete, professional, and effective veterinary treatment. The particular urgency I had observed during the third visit was because the cat had developed a small secondary infection in the area of the cuts, which needed to be treated quickly and with specific medications so as not to compromise the entire recovery progress and not to put at risk the life of the animal that had already suffered so much. The envelope she handed Miguel during their last visit contained the final prescriptions, detailed and specific instructions for post-treatment care, a comprehensive report on the cat's positive health progress, and precise guidelines for maintaining its health and well-being. From then on, the animal was officially cured, with its paw functioning perfectly, all wounds completely healed and without sequelae, and requiring only basic maintenance care and lots of love to continue living a happy and healthy life. That's why Miguel was so visibly relieved, calm, and happy these past few weeks. He had managed to save a precious life, give a second chance to an abandoned and suffering animal, and closely monitor its complete and miraculous recovery after weeks of dedication, concern, and intensive care. The profound satisfaction of having done the right thing, of having helped a defenseless and needy creature, and of having seen the complete success of the treatment, was evident in every smile, every gesture, and in all the renewed calm he demonstrated. Carla, who was initially in another country only temporarily for academic and professional purposes, ended up receiving an absolutely excellent and irresistible job offer at a highly specialized and renowned veterinary clinic here in our city. She decided to accept the offer and move permanently to another country, a decision that left the entire family extremely happy, relieved, and grateful. Now she can continue to closely monitor Simo's health and well-being, while also being much closer to the family she loves so much. The cat, now affectionately named Simo, was chosen especially for Miguel in honor of the patron saint of animals, and officially became the family's beloved pet. When Carmen finally learned the whole moving story and discovered the truth about the mysterious visits, she was deeply moved and proud of her husband's noble and charitable gesture, and together they found a practical and effective solution to live harmoniously with her allergies. Simone now lives primarily in the spacious backyard and covered laundry area in a special, comfortable, and cozy corner that Miguel lovingly prepared for him. It features a heated house for cold days, clean and full food bowls, a variety of toys for fun, and plenty of room to run and play. Carmen regularly takes the appropriate allergy medication to live comfortably with the new furry member of the family, and she has even become very attached to the affectionate and grateful kitty. Look, my dear girls, how this whole story taught me a valuable, important, and unforgettable lesson about the dangers of judging situations, people, and behaviors without knowing all the real facts, without understanding the full context, and without having enough information to form fair and well-founded opinions. How often do we women, especially those of us with more life experience who think we know human nature well, create complicated, elaborate, and dramatic theories about the behaviors we observe, when in fact the explanation is much simpler, much more innocent, much more beautiful, and much more touching than our imagination can create? My exaggerated curiosity, my tendency toward the dramatic, and my need to find mysteries and complications where they didn't exist transformed an absolutely beautiful story of love for animals, family charity, genuine compassion, and veterinary care into a dramatic soap opera full of betrayals, secrets, lies, and forbidden relationships. Now, every time I see Miguel playing lovingly with Simo in the backyard, feeding him that special and expensive food that Carla recommended, stroking that beautiful and expressive Siamese nose, talking to him as if he were a member of the family, I remember this valuable lesson about the importance of not jumping to conclusions, of not judging situations without knowing all the details, and of always considering that the simplest and most beautiful explanations may be the true ones. And best of all, I got a wonderful, moving, and inspiring story to tell and share. A true story about how human kindness, unconditional love for animals, the professional dedication of a skilled veterinarian, and family solidarity can come together to create the most special, most meaningful, and most lasting bonds in life. Simo has made a full recovery and has become an absolute sensation, the undisputed darling of the entire neighborhood. Every neighbor on the block adores him unconditionally. Children on the street always stop by the house to pet and play with him. Adults constantly ask about his health, and he has become a sort of official mascot, a symbol of hope, and an inspiring example for our entire peaceful and welcoming neighborhood. It is truly beautiful and moving to see how an animal that arrived injured, abandoned, suffering, and without hope managed to find a family that loves him unconditionally, veterinary care that saved him and restored his health, and a forever home where he can live safely with affection and happiness for the rest of his life. Subscribe to the channel for more real, touching, and surprising stories like this one, which show how our perceptions and prejudices can completely mislead us, and how reality can be much more beautiful, much more exciting, and much more inspiring than our suspicions and dramatic theories. Like the video if you enjoyed this exciting and unexpected twist, and tell me in the comments if you've ever been in similar situations where you imagined one thing but the reality was completely different, simpler, and more beautiful. I love reading your stories of misunderstandings, surprising discoveries, and life lessons. And don't miss our upcoming videos, where I share more adventures, discoveries, reflections, and life lessons from my daily life as a curious but sometimes hasty neighborhood observer. Sometimes the best, most touching, and most meaningful stories are truly right under our noses, patiently waiting to be discovered, understood, and valued as they deserve. Until next time, my dear girls, and always remember, not everything that seems mysterious is actually complicated.